I wanted to love Buffy Season 7. I wanted the finale to this character-driven saga to be moving and powerful and call back to earlier seasons and cap off 144 episodes of arcs and relationships. More than anything, I'm bereaved by the Season 7 that could have been, coming off the tail of the emotional whirlwind of Season 6. This is, of course, my opinion, as exemplified by the I in the title of this video and the subjective word love. I imagine there's many takes on this as there are Buffy fans, so do let me know in the comments. The point is, I wanted to love Buffy Season 7, and I didn't. On paper, so much of it could have worked. Season 6 gave us excellent material to build on. The explosive fight between Buffy and Willow, Anya's desperation for purpose, each of the Scoobies grappling with the elephant-shaped chasm in the room, and Faith comes back. That alone should have opened so many doors, the way she foils both Buffy and eventually Willow, her history with the group with Xander. But none of these threads are sewn together, and we're left with 22 episodes of unexplored potential. It's like the season brought together a bunch of parts for an IKEA desk, and instead of assembling them in the logical way, just dumped them on the floor. Buffy Season 7 neither builds on Season 6's material, nor makes a compelling thesis on its own without it. Most of its big moments are either corner-cutting payoff without build-up, and ignores or undermines many opportunities for plot and character integration. The beginning of Season 7 is at best, honestly, really excellent. We get character studies, follow through from the previous season, character moments, and beautiful affirmations of the show's main philosophy. There's, of course, fun little Buffy classic genre play like with Storyteller. Conversations with Dead People is emotionally and creatively brilliant and deserved its Emmy win. In my latest rewatch, and the first time since my first time revisiting the season, I was really surprised at how confident and put together the early episodes are. The daily rhythm of the Harris Summers household is sweet, and the return to Sunnydale High is nostalgic, and feels on point with the commentary about growing up now that these characters are in their early 20s. I love the changed feel even from the late 90s to now early 2000s high school, and what's changed and what hasn't now that Dawn's there. Best of all, we get a series of proper character studies that are as solid as a Buffy character study gets. Some stuff feels too little too late, particularly Anya's Selfless, which frankly deserves its own video. It's the kind of episode that makes you realize, oh, Anya's never really had a proper arc, has she? And it's a real pity because Emma's acting chops aside, Anya has one of the most fascinating characters in the universe. At over a millennia old, she's got this colored and rich history that puts Angelus to shame, and we just start to delve into it now. But Selfless chips at Anya's question of identity and gets at the core of her desperation over Xander's abandonment. If Willow loses herself in control, Buffy in darkness, Anya loses herself in relationships. The cut between the Once More with Feeling B-sides track and Anya lying limp over a sword is one of the biggest stomach-sinking moments on the show. Help is one of the most excellent Buffyverse episodes. It works as a self-contained story, and the absurdist question of, does what I do even matter, feels especially relevant as an echo to Buffy Season 5 despair as she recovers in Season 7. Chosen isn't a perfect finale, but it's very, very good. Themes of shared power are pitch perfect to what the show was always building towards. After a really strong intro, everything starts to unravel a bit. Midway through, the season shifts gears. Giles brings the plot with him, and from then on, the needs of advancing the plot will overcome most everything else. First, let's get this out of the way. The potentials themselves aren't the main issue of the season, though they do get blamed for it. What they are is underwritten, and they can fall into stale and, worse, racist tropes. None of them get sufficient focus, aside from Kennedy, to really develop into anything meaningful. So as a result, they're mostly cannon fodder and reasons for Buffy to have somber speeches. Yes, the text lampshades and is self-aware of this preachy element of the season, but that doesn't make it any better. So my issue isn't the potentials themselves, but the way they're used, which is a symptom of the problems with the season itself. I don't mean to upset anyone who likes Andrew or his presence in Season 7, but I do find myself wondering, why him? In the final season, between him and Jonathan as candidates for redemption, why not choose the character that had a far more consistent presence? Even more so, one that had had repeated run-ins with Buffy in episodes making the case for the shared nature of human pain. This isn't one of my biggest gripes, it's just Jonathan properly redeeming himself and even potentially dying at the end, all with years of the rocky rapport with the Scoobies, would have felt infinitely more fitting. In a season that could have been about recognizing the similarities between Buffy and her friends, she's most alienated from them.
It's only a matter of time before you realize I'm the only one here for you, pet. You got no one else!
You sent away the one person that's been watching my back. Again.
We're all watching your back.
We get so few, if any, meaningful conversations between her and the Scoobies, particularly Willow and, to a lesser degree, Anya, that aren't about the plot. Some of Buffy's best character material is in the early episodes. Conversations with dead people puts words to the complex we've seen developing in her. We get this great groundwork for the season's themes. Buffy feels that, as much as her friends might try, they can't really understand her, that she'll always walk a road apart. And we've seen, to some degree, that that's true. As the Slayer, Buffy does have unique choices that only she can make, and consequences only she can understand. Buffy's burdens are large and uniquely hers, but when she's been too overwhelmed by them, it's Willow that she's counted on. This occurred both in Season 5 and then most problematically in Season 6. Willow, due to her increasing raw abilities and Buffy's reliance on her, has filled the void left by a mentally and then literally absent Buffy. By Season 6, Willow's had a taste of what it means to be in this leadership role, but it doesn't bring them together, obviously. It widens the chasm between them because they're not on the same page. Buffy is depressed but can't talk to Willow about it because she's the one who brought her back and expects a thank you. Willow is out of control, but needs Buffy to be okay so that her actions meant something, so they can't talk honestly. We have many near misses, especially in the smashed bed scene, where the two of them almost reveal their inner truths to each other, but they don't get to, and so we get the fight in Villains. There's a conversation to be had here, and if she and Willow had been allowed to talk, they'd have to lay it all out there.
Come on, this is a huge deal for me. 6 years as a sideman, now I get to be the Slayer.
Thanks for bringing me back. Again.
That's what I do.
The resentment Willow felt as the big gun, the pressure Buffy felt to be better for Willow's sake, the years of bottled conflict, and most of all, their extremely similar downward spirals in the previous season. If we're talking about responsibility through general Buffy this season, Buffy and Willow's relationship isn't anecdotal to this plot, it's central. Season 7 builds on Season 5's unearthing the source and purpose of Buffy's power. And Willow became an extension of this power, filling in for her when it was too much, and eventually when she died, until that responsibility destroyed her. They have the most in common they've ever had. These parallels were written in, and yet we don't get to actually unpack what they mean. Conversations like these would not only be cathartic for the audience and the characters, but would actively comment on this question that the show has always grappled with. How much can those around Buffy understand her? And too often, the Season 7 script refuses opportunities for Buffy to build on her connections with the Scoobies, Wood, or Faith in ways that would support her recovery arc. And maybe because of this, Buffy in this season feels like a shadow of herself, hollow. This scene is great, but this is the tip of the iceberg. This isn't enough. Please let them talk. Willow's arc also looks promising in the early episodes. Same time, same place got me really excited. Maybe I forgot, I thought. Maybe they handle Willow's issues from Season 6 in a thoughtful, drawn-out way. Same Time, Same Place does a number of insightful and successful things. It addresses Willow's avoidance of difficult situations, and the way she uses magic, even subconsciously, to make that easier. Here, magic is as it is at its most consistent, an extension of Willow's emotions. The scene with Willow and Buffy at the end is one of the few acknowledgments of their parallel stories last season. But after that, Willow's struggle with controlling those around her and quick fixes is replaced with this generic, I lost control and killed someone. And her final scene in Chosen is emblematic of these greater issues. Overcome by grief and on the heels of identity-based behavioral addiction, Willow's hair turns black when she absorbs magic in an attempt to stop feeling. Not only does she absorb magic, but she makes a clear distinction between the self she is now and the self she's become. And she starts talking in third person to remove herself from the pain of what's happened. And then in Chosen, Willow's hair is white. Because white is the opposite of black. She was bad when her hair was black, and she's better now. So it's white.
Get it?
Even though we get no serious explanation as to how or why, and without dealing with the grief or the issue with control and quick fixes. The imagery alone isn't the problem. It's the fact that the imagery is a placeholder for what should have been a proper narrative undertaking. How did Willow's perception of magic and how it relates to her anxieties of usefulness change? How did she recontextualize her own helpfulness, and even where that desire to be needed even comes from? Did she find other ways to prove her worth, especially in relation to being Buffy's lieutenant? None of this heavy lifting is done. Imagery is great, but it's not a substitute for actual themes it's meant to represent. Willow's main problem isn't that she was a murderer. It was her pathological insecurity, need for control, and need to be needed. Tara's death is a big part of last season's debris that is brushed aside. Not only was it the catalyst for Willow's most extreme turn, but she was a big sister to Dawn, and a support system for a depressed Buffy. Yes, there are bigger fish to fry. But the fallout from this doesn't feel like a Scooby was lost. The way that Tara's death is dealt or not dealt with feels disrespectful to what she would have meant to the team. Grief about her is scrapped and accelerated through, and what should be a significant character opportunity with the traumatic event of the loss of a Scooby becomes a footnote. The Killer in Me is an excellent example of this half-baked execution, and I might talk about it on its own at some point, even though I really don't want to talk negatively just for the sake of it. It appears to be a character study, but brings up questions without ever answering them. Think about it. What was the resolution? What was the problem solved by the end? In this episode, Willow's grief is finally spoken of directly, and how it relates to her hesitancy to use magic. Then, in the last minutes of the episode, Willow finally addresses her guilt, feeling like she's somehow responsible for what happened to Tara, and that by even considering the possibility of moving on, feels like she's betrayed her. And she completely breaks down. And then as a solution, Kennedy kisses her, and it's over. And this is never spoken of again. The episode is so confused. It digs at an emotional truth, uncovers it, and then rather than tackle it narratively, cuts to credits. It feels like a slow chug 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 to the top of a roller coaster that has no descent. Why did you build this? But most of all, I find it bizarre that it's overlooked that Anya could fill parts of Spike's role in Season 7, as someone who'd caused harm and recently repented, with whom the group had a mostly positive relationship. All the questions about who was I then, who am I now, would land even harder, seeing as Anya's regression to and back from demonhood are related to her search for identity. Most infuriatingly, Anya's existential revelation happens off-screen, develops off-screen, and only happens so her death can be punctuated by it. Why has she decided it's worth fighting like humans? How did she get to this understanding? Faith is maybe one of the most complex Buffyverse characters, and she's underused in a season where she fits perfectly. It's awesome to have her back, but it's way too late in the game. She's at times been both Buffy and Willow's foil, but she's not really used to say anything meaningful about either. Bringing her back earlier could have brought depth to Willow's recovery after a murderous spiral, and she and Faith can talk about how they contend with responsibility and the need to move forward, especially because they both have to do so in this coming battle. Both have to give up things that they feel are part of their penance. Faith has to leave jail to help, and Willow has to use magic. Buffy, having sunk to the lows of her depression, has touched a darkness that Faith alluded to earlier.
You're all about control. You have no idea what it's like on the other side.
mean, nothing's in control. Nothing makes sense. There's just pain and hate, and nothing you do means anything.
Knowing this, they could commiserate over that particular loneliness, building to their exchange in the finale. Beyond just the conversation on the bed. Faith has been Buffy's shadow since her introduction in Season 3, and has to this point grown into a developed and a self-actualized person. This would be the best time to integrate them. I got so excited when we met Wood. I'd forgotten enough of the season to hope that he'd be as interesting a character as he's set up to be. The son of a Slayer, capable of giving insight into what it was like to watch his mom, to be raised by her, loved by her, maybe even neglected by her, and observe the burden of Slayerhood, is indispensable to the story. Instead, he becomes a vehicle for Spike's story, when he could have been used at the very least to hold Spike accountable for the compounding consequences of his past. The focus pans from his grief and the loss of his mother to the absolution of Spike's responsibility now that he has a soul.
I don't give a piss about your mom. She was a Slayer, I was a vampire.
See, unlike you, I had a mother who loved me back.
He even so much as looks at me funny again, I'll kill him.
And you're looking for revenge on a man that doesn't exist anymore.
Buffy.
Compare this, for example, to Holtz and Angel in Angel Season 3.
There's no justice for the things I did to you.
It would mean a little. Not much, but it would be something.
And I'm sorry for whatever little it might mean.
Instead of focusing on the ways his mother loved him, even imperfectly, Spike is framed as correct, or at least observant, in claiming that she secretly wanted it. Instead of his apparent role in relating to Buffy in a season about reversing Slayer aloneness, Wood's story and his mother's are discarded as soon as it's inconvenient. He does get some good bits and some wonderful chemistry with Faith, but even that I wish had gotten more development. But the main thing is that one of Buffy's greatest strengths as a show has always been its focus on relationships, and the decisions characters make influencing one another. The central metaphor made explicit in Season 4 showed Buffy's friends as parts of her, strengthening the idea that she's stronger because of their ability to relate to each other. Season 6 disastrously tears everyone apart, but front and center in that chain of implosions is Buffy and Willow. If anything, the end of Season 6 showed how similar they are, and how, at their unhealthiest, they exacerbate each other's problems. Season 7 appears to acknowledge this with same time, same place, but then any advancement of their relationship stops there. Not only does the show not resolve this character-driven disaster of last season, it doesn't even address it for the majority of its run. The fight between Buffy and Willow in the last episodes of Season 6 was a revelation, full of resentment and jealousy.
Being the Slayer means something you can't conceive of.
Oh, Buffy, you really need to have every square inch of your ass kicked. I get it now. The Slayer thing really isn't about the violence. It's about the power.
This is the kind of thing that leaves a mark. You think they'd want to talk about it, but there's just no time. Xander and Willow had an equally revealing conversation at the Bluff for both of them, Xander reaffirming to Willow that she's somebody without magic, as her oldest friend, and Xander, after dragging everyone else into the emotional cyclone of his insecurities, is able to offer incredible empathy to someone else. Both of them, at the point that they would least be able to believe it, have a reason to believe that they are worth loving. Once again, this is stuff friends would talk about. This is arc developmental content. And not just that, content that would fit with the larger themes of the season. Empty Places is maybe the best example of beats being driven by drama rather than by flowing through organic character behaviors. So first, in Dirty Girls, Xander makes his Buffy's heart speech. Then he's part of the group kicking her out. Then they're fine again just in time for the finale. These moments just sort of happen, right? They don't spring organically, but they feel anchored in the particular agenda of the episode. These scenes want the drama of the betrayal, but none of the build-up, and copping out of dealing satisfyingly with the fallout.
Didn't you say to me today, you can't trust us? I mean, maybe there's something there that should be addressed.
This show is about the core four. It started with them, and so obviously it intends to finish with them. But you can't have the matched shots of them walking into the school together and Giles repeating an earlier line without actually rebuilding what those parallels are supposed to mean. It's like the white willow hair. Imagery without substance. The central metaphor of the show is that Buffy's friends are pieces of her, or parts of her. Now, I take that to mean that no, the Scoobies aren't just symbols or metaphors. Scoobies are people. But, we have relationships that bring out different parts of us in different ways. And so the richness that the Scoobies bring, including their conflicts with each other, is a key piece of making Buffy the successful person and slayer that she is. In season 3, we already see that the Slayer's aloneness is leveraged to make her dependent on the Council, but long term it weakens her. Time and again, what destroyed the Slayer was taking on her burden alone. Season 7 refutes this with the potentials in a really awesome and clever way. The chosenness itself was actually a system of control. In season 6, we see Buffy alienated for a number of reasons. The Scoobies are all fragmented, but most specifically, Buffy is disconnected from her metaphorical spirit and her mind. Her spirit, her zest for life, and her rational thinking are not present for most of season 6, and so we get what transpires. So you would think season 7 would intend to rebuild and heal these fractures. But that doesn't happen.
You can't beat beat!
A dead horse!
Buffy and Giles butt heads throughout, especially in Lies My Parents Told Me, and then he's presented as overbearing and wrong. But the core of that conflict, and even the question they're disagreeing on, isn't actually tackled. Likewise with Willow, they never discuss the deep roots of what actually happened between them. Willow began to do magic more enthusiastically, and in tandem, Buffy started to rely on her more heavily. But the more Buffy relied on her, the more Willow tied her inherent value exclusively to magic. The issue is that you can't make the metaphor a central part of your story. You can't show the consequences of it in a season, and then the next season talk about togetherness and make superficial use of that metaphor without earning it. And maybe for that reason, whether by design or not, Buffy feels like a flattened, hollow version of herself in season 7. And in addition to unpacking all the heavy stuff, it's also just missing fun, which would have been such a palate cleanser after how miserable much of season 6 was. We have these characters in their most complete incarnations yet. They have so much history. It should be brimming with chemistry, but minus a handful of exceptions, we barely get time where we get to see these people hang out and be friends. What makes me even more insane is that there are opportunities written in where you think they're going to let the Scoobies talk, and then make a point to have them avoid each other.
Why is this here?
Which brings me to what my issues amount to is plot focus in a character-driven show. Now, plot and character aren't mutually exclusive, you need both, and I actually think a plot-heavy final season for Buffy would have been really fun, but the balance is off. Season 7's plot buckles under its own weight and refuses to link itself to the already there character buttresses, and for me, this makes the season suffer mightily. Willow's issue was feeling uniquely alone as a fixer. Buffy felt uniquely alone in her burden. Anya's struggle with morality and identity foils Willow's own anxieties.
What if I'm really nobody?
I mean, Buffy, who was I? Just some girl.
Have them talk. So, by the time Chosen rolls around and Giles gets his cute, nostalgic, the Earth is doomed throwback, it lands a bit hollow. It didn't feel earned. We'd been told all about shared power, and yet the team was as distant as they'd ever been. I don't typically like to make quote-unquote negative videos, and negative talk for the sake of it wasn't the intent of this either. I have said before, and I still mean, that I'd prefer to talk about the things that I love. I think it's good to be lovingly critical of things I like. Buffy is one of my very, very favorite shows, and as such, it was frustrating to watch it miss so many apparently obvious opportunities for cathartic storytelling in its last season. But I also don't think the season itself is without redeeming qualities, or that the people who like it are wrong for doing so. The themes are there, and they're framed by some great imagery. They just lacked that character foundation to carry it all the way through. And in a show like Buffy, which had proven its ability to handle character in a thoughtful, meaningful way, it was a bit of a shame. Oh well. We'll always have Chosen.